As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experiences, or trauma. Today, we have a special guest. Her name is Lauren, and she's an integrative energy practitioner specializing in EFT tapping for stress, anxiety, and trauma. She guides her clients on a journey of self-healing to break through obstacles, physical, mental, or emotional, that are keeping them stuck and holding them back in life or business. She believes we all have the answers within, and sometimes we just need a little help accessing them. So welcome, Lauren. So great to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Wendy.
Yes, happy to share your wisdom and your experience. And before we got on, we were talking about more of your anxiety-related challenges that occur to you due to life circumstances. And so I would like to give you the platform to go ahead and share who you are, how you got here, and what are the couple main struggles, because I know we talked about several that can help the audience know that there's more beyond the trauma, or in your behalf would be like anxiety.
Yeah. So, well, I am a mom. I'm a military wife. I was a former marketer before I got into this world of energy work. And my story really begins when we found out that my husband was going to have to deploy. He was active duty for several years, and we had done several deployments. And when you're active duty, you know when those deployments are going to be, and you can plan for them. There's a community of people, all other spouses that are going through the same thing. And then he transitioned off of active duty and went into the reserves. We moved across the country. We had been living in California, and we had moved to Virginia, and we lived there for a while he was doing that. We moved again to Delaware, and then shortly thereafter, we got this notification that he was going to need to deploy. And it came out of left field, really wasn't expecting it. And I found myself starting to have panic attacks. This was going to be the first deployment since having children. So that was a big difference too. And I started waking up in the middle of the night, and my heart would be racing, not being able to breathe, thinking that something was wrong. Found myself going to a doctor who told me that this was anxiety and recommended some medication. And I started taking that medication, and I really didn't like how it made me feel. And so I decided that I was going to give myself a month to try and find some other things, see if I could move the needle at all on my own. And if not, then go back to the doctor. And that's what I did. And so I found myself in a yoga class, and I saw a flyer for yoga teacher training, and something deep within me that intuition was screaming, like, this is what you need to do. And so I signed up on the spot, and that was the best decision I could have made, because it introduced me to a whole lot of different healing modalities. So I went on to become yoga instructor, but I also started learning about Reiki, and I became a Reiki practitioner. I was introduced to meditation and sound healing. I signed up for a life coaching program, and in that program I was introduced to EFT, which stands for the emotional freedom technique, which is this process of gently tapping on certain points of the body while acknowledging the emotions that you're feeling and speaking out loud. And through the combination of all of these healing modalities, I found myself beginning to feel better. It really was helping me. It was helping to ground me, and one modality kind of just led to the next. And I just kept on following those little, what I call nudges or soul taps, to explore these different things. And it made all the difference in the world. And so much so that I went on to get certified so that I could share them with other people. And then these tools really helped me with some challenging times in my life that happened after that. I mean, we ended up getting through that deployment. My husband and I ended up living apart for 22 months because he was deployed. Yeah, it was a long time. He was deployed for 13, but then he tore his ACL while he was over there. When he came back, he needed to have surgery, but he needed to have surgery from the base that he was deployed from. And so we continued to have to live apart for almost another year. And and so, these practices became a regular part of my day, of my self-care. And I credit that with, one, being able to be the mom that I wanted to be for my kids. That was really my motivation in the beginning, because I found myself snapping at them and, just really not feeling good, and knowing that I needed to take care of myself so that I could show up for them. But then, life happens, and some hard things can happen. And unfortunately, one of those things for our family was that my father-in-law committed suicide. And obviously that was very traumatic for all of us. And these tools really helped me through a very dark time.
Yes. So with the other challenges that you had, what was the recourse that you used? Was it more EFT, or was it a combination of everything that you were doing?
Yeah, it was a combination, but I would say EFT really was what helped me the most. And I was surprised by that. I was definitely skeptical at this idea of tapping on myself and talking, and then that was going to make me feel better. But it really works. And what I can say is that I would just recommend to people that whether it's tapping or whether any sort of modality that's kind of showing up in your universe that you're intrigued by, that there's some sort of curiosity about, go explore that. Because I am a firm believer that whatever is showing up in your universe is showing up for a reason. And you owe yourself that gift of exploring that, because it could be the thing.
Right.
Yeah, it could be the thing that really makes the change for you. And for me, it was. And so that's why I like to share that with other people.
Right. And when you talked about you were on anxiety medication, how did you know to either get off of it, switch off, or look for something more holistic?
I just didn't like how it made me feel. I was very tired. I just didn't feel like myself. I don't know how else to describe it, but that. And I knew I needed to do something. So it was really the motivation for me to see if I could figure anything out on my own, and knowing that if I didn't, I would go back to the doctor, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with medication. I think medication can be very, very helpful in certain situations. But for me at that time, it wasn't the right medication. It wasn't what I needed then. And so it kickstarted me on this journey.
And the anxiety, is this something that was your first time experiencing with your husband being deployed, or did you have any anxiety when you were younger?
Yeah, I would probably classify myself as an anxious kid,
Okay.
but I had never had panic attacks.
Okay.
It was always, I think I was always nervous. I was always kind of like in my head thinking like, what are they thinking? Like that sort of thing. But I had never had those like stop you in your tracks, panic attacks where you feel like you're having a heart attack. That had never been
It's
my
more severe.
yeah.
Right. And so with your clients that you help, what do they normally come to you for? What kind of anxiety?
Yeah, whether it's anxiety and there's a specific reason that they know that they're anxious, or if there is a fear that they have. I recently worked with a woman who had a fear of going on elevators, and we were able to work through that, and she was able to get on an elevator and not have a panic attack. So, that can be, and that was life-changing for her, because it was limiting her in where she was able to go on vacation. She couldn't go to Manhattan because she couldn't go stay in a hotel there. And so she came to me because it had gotten to a point where she tried other things, nothing was working, and she had heard about tapping and wanted to explore it. Sometimes it's limiting beliefs. So I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs who, as an entrepreneur, you can have these thoughts that start swirling in your head about not being good enough or not worthy of charging a certain amount, or whatever these negative thoughts are that can really keep you being stuck. So that's another thing that I work with people on. Or physical pain. And so a lot of the time there can be emotional components to physical pain. And sometimes we're aware of that, and sometimes it's more on a subconscious level. And so this work is really a process of helping people to peel back the layers to get to the root of what's going on. Because, as humans, we have all of these experiences in our lives, and all of these experiences have emotions attached to them. And when they are the uncomfortable emotions, most people don't want to feel them. And so what do? We stuff them down and we distract ourselves with something else. And so that can work in the short term, but it can't work in the long term. And it all catches up with you at some point, and those emotions are going to come out in some way. And sometimes they come out emotionally and you're lashing out at people that don't necessarily deserve it. And sometimes those emotions come out physically with physical pain. And especially when we're talking about anxiety and stress, when I ask people, when you're stressed out, where do you feel that in your body? I mean, I don't think I've come across anybody who doesn't have an answer to that question. It's like, oh yeah, I get headaches, or I have pain in my neck and my shoulders, or I get stomach aches, or whatever it is, And so, figuring out that it's not just the one thing that's triggered you that is the problem. It's all the other stuff that we have not allowed ourselves to process and to feel that has led you to where you are. And so it's allowing yourself to have the space, holding the space to feel those feelings.
Right. And I know you said you're a mom. How do you think this would help also moms when they have a busy life, school, her work, and anxiety? Like how would this alleviate?
Yeah, I mean, as moms, I think we're always putting everybody else first. We're always taking care of everybody else, and it's really important to take care of yourself. So even and tapping is so simple. That's the thing. It's such a simple technique. It can be more complex when implementing it, but the practice of figuring out where the points are, tapping and breathing, that in itself can help to calm the nervous system. There's science behind this. So it's not just some like woo-woo out there thing. So when the points that we're tapping on are the end points of the meridians. And the meridians are how energy moves through the body. And so it's like this, I compare it to acupuncture. So if you go to an acupuncturist, they take needles and they put them in at certain points in your body. The points that they're putting them in at are the end points of the meridian. So instead of acupuncture, this is acupressure. So we're doing it to ourselves and we're applying this acupressure. And what's happening is that it's sending a message to the amygdala in the brain to reduce the amount of cortisol. So the cortisol is the stress hormone. And for those that are watching this on YouTube, I always like to give this demonstration. So if we picture my fist here as my brain and my front of my knuckles here as the prefrontal cortex, this is where we make our good sound decisions. So information comes up the brainstem and to the prefrontal cortex, and we make those good decisions. But when the amygdala, which controls fight or flight, we're going to pretend that's my thumb here, when that is going off, this alarm is going off, all of a sudden that prefrontal cortex goes offline. And so now the information cannot get to that part of the brain. So if when you are super stressed out, you might even say to yourself, like, I can't even think straight. So when you're a mom and you've got so much going on and you're trying to work and you're trying to take care of the kids and you're trying to do dinner and you're trying to take them to karate lessons and all these things, it can be really overwhelming. And so it's like you can't even think straight. So the information can't get to that part of the brain. So what's happened when we're tapping is this message comes to the amygdala and says, hey, amygdala, you don't need to be creating all of that cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And it's been shown to reduce the amount of cortisol pumping through the body by up to 43%. It's a really, really big number. And so as we tap, it calms that amygdala, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and now we can make those sound good decisions again. We can think clearly. When we can think clearly, we can feel better and we can make those good decisions. So, I mean, I think that in itself can be a very helpful tool for a mom that's in a stressful situation that needs to just take a minute, So in addition to maybe doing some deep breathing, you could add some tapping to it, and it's going to help you out.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because we can all use, we can't control our everyday situations, right? And things come up, and sometimes we do need a quick way to release some anxiety. And as moms, we're also having to work, and there are a lot of moms work nowadays. There's not a lot of stay-at-home moms, so they have to do double duty. So that's very, challenging, and that creates anxiety for moms.
Yeah.
So what are practical tip that a mom can use to help lessen somehow in her midday anxiety?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I like to tell my clients is to check in with yourself with how you're feeling. We can get so caught up in the busyness of our day that we don't really stop to be like, how am I feeling? And then on top of that, it's like, what am I thinking about? So if you are feeling anxious and overwhelmed, what is that attached to? So beginning to create the awareness between how you're feeling and what you're thinking is the first step, and then beginning to create that change.
Okay.
And then, and then with the way that tapping works too, is that we really acknowledge how we're feeling. So if we're feeling really anxious, we don't try and, just flip a switch and say, I feel great, it's a good day, like start saying positive affirmations, right? Because there's a disconnect there. You can say the positive affirmation, but you're not feeling that. If you're not really feeling that inside, then it's not doing anything. And so the way that tapping works is that you can just tap on these points and be like, I'm so anxious. I'm anxious and it's okay, and I'm okay. Even though I'm anxious, I love and accept myself. There's different phrases that you can incorporate. And what that does is it allows you to acknowledge how you are feeling in that moment. And sometimes the act of saying it out loud, speaking it out loud, that in itself can begin to make a shift, because so often we're just thinking these thoughts over and over and over in our head. And when we say it out loud, we can begin to see it from a different perspective, and that can help too. So I would say checking in with yourself, giving yourself the couple of minutes if you need it. If you recognize, oh, I'm really at a heightened state right now, I'm going to take a few minutes to whatever feels good to you, whether that's tapping or doing some deep breathing or going for a walk or dancing it out, turning on some music and moving it, right? Because all of these different modalities that I've mentioned so far, the main thing that they all have in common is that they're a way of moving energy. And the definition of emotion is energy in motion. So it's this idea that our emotions, they want to move. They do not want to be stuffed down and ignored and, distracted. We distract ourselves. They want to be felt. And so if we allow ourselves to feel it, even if it is an uncomfortable feeling, then we can move through it and it's not constantly chasing after us and we're not constantly running from it.
I love that definition. And emotion. What did you say? It's energy and motion.
Energy in
Emotion
motion is the
is
definition.
energy in motion, and it's true. It doesn't want to stay stuck, and that's perhaps why our inner sensors, right, that we have, like the amygdala, we do need it, because if there's a big bear chasing us, we want that adrenaline so we can get further away, or whatever we have to do. But in everyday life situations, that can get triggered, like it's so huge. So this is really great at calming all of that down.
Yes,
And
exactly.
right. And then that, with like you said, whatever modality moms want to use, whatever they feel called for. I really like what you said was about, it's all about moving energy, right?
That's exactly it. It's about moving energy and figuring out what feels best in your body. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's, dancing, whatever it is for you. And so, that takes a little bit of trial and error and allowing yourself to go explore these different things and see what works and feels best in your body. You're going to know. It'll be like, oh, wow, I feel different. I mean, the first time that I ever tapped, even though I was skeptical, I was surprised by the end of it was short. It was a group tapping session that I was introduced to this in. And I was just like, whoa, like my body
Oh,
feels
you felt
different.
it.
Oh yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know why this is working. I was very curious about it. Like, I don't know what's happening, but I want more of this and I want to understand more of this. And that's really just been my whole MO, really. It's like, I need to learn, I want to learn more, I want to understand. And so, and I think what I love about tapping too is that there is science behind it. There are lots of studies that have been done with it. It's also, there's a woman who is in Australia, Dr. Peta Stapleton, and she is doing a lot of work with bringing tapping into schools there, and how this is positively impacting kids, not only with reducing their anxiety and stress, but increasing their grades and, teaching our kids how to manage stress and feel their feelings from a young age, I think is really, really important.
What do you think in your experience? This is just, we're not any, medical doctors or anything, but holistically, like, what do you think? Because when you mentioned kids in schools, like, why do you think we develop as kids anxiety?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I think some of it is environmental and, if you as a parent are very stressed out and very overwhelmed and they see how you're reacting, I think kids pick up on that. They can feel
I
that too.
like that, kids pick. Yes, because they're very sensory, right?
Yeah. They pick up on so much. They're little sponges.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know. I think maybe some people are just maybe wired more for overthinking. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely, I think of my son, and he obviously was in the same environment as my daughter, but he definitely has more issues with anxiety and stress. And so I do think that maybe, some of that is hereditary. I feel like my husband deals with a lot of anxiety. I've dealt with a lot of anxiety. So maybe
Interesting.
I don't know. I'm not really sure, but figuring out the tools to manage it at an early age and I do think, they're doing mindful moments in my kids' school, and talking about deep breathing and different things that they can do. But I think it should be a full-on class, not just like a 5-minute thing.
Yes, right. Oh yeah, because I find that very interesting about kids having anxiety. And like you said, it could be environmental, it could be also like when you mentioned I do womb healing, and it could, like you said, kids are sponges, but we don't realize, like, even in the womb, how the baby's already picking up the mom's energies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And then like intergenerational stuff. I mean, I'm fascinated by that, right? Because like when I was in my mother's womb, right? She was in her mother's womb, right? Like, so my egg was already in my mother, who was in her mother, right?
oh, right.
And so it's very interesting to think about that, and intergenerationally, like how
Right.
everything
Yes.
comes
Right.
down.
Right. Right. And I think we forget about, that it's true how
Yeah.
her eggs were in her mom's,
Mhm.
right? Like she came from those eggs.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
crazy. Yes. And so that makes sense. And yeah, so I always like wonder like how kids generate anxiety, because I don't think they're born with it, but they may, if it comes generationally too, it can happen that they're more predisposed to
Right.
it,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely
So I
possible.
just love that we have tools,
Mhm.
right? To I there's someone, she has a podcast, I don't know her name, but her thing is skills, not pills. I don't know if you've heard of her,
I
but
haven't.
it's true, right? So if we learn the skills, we don't have to take the pills,
Right. Yeah.
right?
If you figure out how to manage it and feel better. And I think it's a lot of, this practice of tuning in and listening to our body, right? And like our emotions is how our body is communicating with us. And
Mhm.
so it is our job to sit with that
Mhm.
and move through that, as
Yeah,
well as the physical pain, right? When we're
right.
in physical pain, there that's our body trying to communicate with us. If you start off, I always think about when I was training for a half marathon. This was like
Mhm.
years and years ago, and I had this pain in my ankle, and I was like, oh, it's fine, it's no big deal, it only hurts when I run. And I was like, no pain no gain kind of mentality, and I just kept running through it. And then it was like, oh yeah, this is hurting more. Oh, now it's hurting when I walk. And then I finally go to the doctor. Oh, it's a hairline fracture, and so just like
Mhm.
not listening to my body, and then it gets really exacerbated. But it's interesting with pain too. If you really begin to tune into the pain and asking, if the pain had a message for you, what would it say? If the pain was an emotion, what emotion would it be? These are questions we don't typically ask ourselves when we're dealing with pain. It's just like, what can I take so that the pain goes away, right? But if we
Right.
get curious about it, there are messages that our body is trying to tell
Oh.
us. And through this work, that can become more clear. We can figure that out, whether
Mm.
that's emotional pain or physical pain. We get curious about it, we ask a lot of questions, we tune in, and what I like to say is come home to ourselves, and we get that clarity.
Yes, and I like the connection with the body, right? So that's amazing. So is there any other tips or what your wisdom that you want to share with moms before we close the episode?
I would just say, trust your gut, listen to your intuition. If something is showing up in your universe, go do it. Don't put it off. Don't keep putting it off if
Mhm.
it's showing up, like
Right.
I can't tell you how many clients have come to me because it's like, oh, I read something in a book about tapping, and then I saw a documentary, and then, a friend mentioned it, right? Paying attention to those things that are happening around you. I can't stress enough how important that is, because I feel like if I had learned that lesson earlier on in my life, it would have helped a lot. Just
Right. Exactly.
really
Exactly.
tuning in and trusting yourself and strengthening that intuition muscle.
I love it. I love it. So I know you have a website called mindshiftwithlauren.com.
Yes, I do.
Where else can the audience find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, and you can find me under Mind Shift with Lauren. And you can also, I have a free masterclass on my website that goes into more of the details behind why tapping works, how it works, the science, what the tapping points are, all of that. So if you're curious and learning about more, you can find that at mindshiftwithlauren.com/masterclass.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I appreciate your presence and thank you so much for sharing on what you do with your clients with anxiety. And I feel it's, an everyday thing that all of us, men, women, even pets have anxiety.
Yeah,
So it's important to find tools that we can help each other in navigating life itself.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a great
Thank
conversation.
you. All right. We'll see you soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.